live in France, you've probably seen the slogan on bus stops or heard it on the radio. Pour votre santé, mangez 5 fruits et légumes par jour, which means for your health, eat 5 fruits and vegetables per day. It's one of the most famous French food guidelines, but there is a lot more to them. And in this video, I'll break down the most common French eating recommendations with my commentary, of course. These guidelines come from Manger, Bouger, which is part of the French National Healthcare Program. The French government makes an effort to make consumers make better food choices. Some tips are great, while others are quite confusing. So I'll use an image of my food pyramid to make it easier to follow. By the way, I've recently covered a healthy eating plate if you haven't watched this video yet. At the base of the pyramid, we have water. For adults, the recommendation is to drink water, tea, coffee, and herbal teas. Tisane, infusion. Sugary drinks like juice and soda should be limited to 1 small glass per day, including diet sodas. And I must agree on this one, because even though juice contains more vitamins and antioxidants, removing the fiber makes it very similar to a glass of Coke in how it affects blood sugar. And I would emphasize more that excessive caffeine intake actually dehydrates the body. So maybe you've heard the 5 fruit and veggies per day slogan, but what does it actually mean? The recommendation is 5 portions of different fruits and vegetables daily, and preferably more vegetables than fruit. For example, 3-4 portions for veggies and the rest for fruit, knowing that 1 portion is around 100 grams. For example, 1 carrot, a small banana, a handful of cherry tomatoes. Daily target is then 500 grams in total, more or less, or 500 grammes, which I hate saying in French. Easiest way to hit this is to have 3 portions of vegetables between lunch and dinner, around 150 grams each, and 2 portions of fruit over the day. It's actually not that complicated with the right planning. Next in our food pyramid, we have starches. And concerning this food group, we have a recommendation to have more whole grains, so consuming more whole wheat or multigrain bread, whole grain pasta, couscous, and brown rice. Or actually semi-complet, which would be half whole grain. I don't know how to translate this one properly. Let me know if this option exists in your country and what a proper translation in English would sound like. Legumes like lentils, beans, chickpeas are another key recommendation. They are in both the starch and protein category and should be consumed twice a week. Next on is dairy. So 2 dairy products are recommended per day for adults, between a small glass of milk and individual yogurt, or 30 grams of cheese, which is 1 portion. And at school I also learned that it was recommended only 1 portion of cheese per day, but I didn't find this info to confirm. But in any case, it is not always realistic for French people, let's be honest. In my version of food pyramid, I put dairy next to protein to show that it actually has some protein in it, but not as much as other animal sources. But actually the current recommendation is to not necessarily have animal proteins like meat, fish, and eggs every single day. But other than having legumes twice a week, they don't actually explain how to replace animal sources of protein with the plant-based ones. There are 3 points concerning proteins. One is red meats and fatty meats like beef, pork, and lamb should be limited to 500 grams per week. Then charcuterie like deli meats, ham, sausages should be limited to 150 grams per week. And the last one concerns fish. Fish should be consumed twice a week, out of which should be a source of fatty fish like sardines, herring, or salmon. The next one in our food pyramid is fat. And the recommendation is to limit fat intake, but still include healthy options like olive oil, nut oils, and canola oil. And there is also a new recommendation to increase nut intake, a small handful of nuts daily, preferably unsalted and not toasted. Next one is sweets. So I already mentioned the recommendation regarding juices and sodas. Another one is more broad and targets ultra-processed foods in general for too high sugar, fat, and salt content. The recommendation is to cook more homemade meals, look for alternatives, and pick foods with a better Nutri-Score, which we'll come back to a little later. We're done with the food pyramid, but there are more guidelines, and let's have a look at the rest. Salt. Of course, salt intake should be reduced. The recommendation is to limit it to 5 grams per day by adding less salt while cooking and having less ultra-processed products. But this recommendation is not always realistic to me because foods like bread and cheese are quite salty, but I wouldn't call them ultra-processed. Alcohol. That's a super important one, especially for French. So the recommendation is to limit alcohol intake to 10 glasses per week, 2 glasses per day, and at least 2 days per week should be dry. I find that it's already a good objective for people who drink a few glasses of wine daily, but I still find 10 glasses per week high. So basically we've covered the manger part, and now we also have bouger. Another important point, which is to stay active, move. And the first guideline is to increase physical activity to at least 30 minutes per day. It can vary from fast-paced walking to bicycling, dancing, and various sports. And the other one is to avoid sitting for too long. And it's recommended to get up and move every 2 hours. And I totally agree with this one. Next one is Nutri-Score. And if you live in France or any new country, you've probably seen these colorful letters. From A, which stands for healthiest choice, to E, the least healthy. The score is calculated based on amount of calories, sugar, saturated fats, fiber, salt, etc. In the past years, it has improved a bit, and it's also been better explained to general population, basically saying that only the products of the same category can be compared between themselves. But I have to be honest with you, I still have beef with this one. I think that the idea to make a decision based on the nutritional profile is great, but having more basic knowledge about nutrition using effective tools like healthy plate or a food pyramid are actually better, because this way, if you eat an already balanced diet and have a couple ultra processed foods here and there, going for the item you really like makes total sense. I might make a more in-depth video about this one. Let me know if you're interested in the comments below. And we're almost done. A couple last recommendations are to go for seasonal and local produce, and also organic if possible. I totally agree with the seasonal and local parts. It's better in terms of nutrition, taste, the planet, and it's often better for the budget too. Organic part I'm more skeptical about because they also bring up GMOs and that organic products don't contain them. Anyways, in my opinion, sometimes it makes sense to buy organic and sometimes it doesn't, but it's a whole other topic. And the last guideline is to increase homemade meals. Yes, cooking more is awesome. To me, cooking is about self-care and nourishment, and I even think it's a form of therapy for some people. And love for homemade meals pushed me to create a meal prep course where you can go from having to cook every day, even when you're tired, to hungry, or going for a fast food meal instead, to having a fridge and freezer full of nourishing and balanced meals you really enjoy. You'll find the link to the course in the description below. And don't forget to subscribe and like this video. This was Vera, not French dietitian. Thank you so much for watching, and I'll see you next time. À bientôt!